these years which passed since the formation of BRICS changed a lot, because when BRICS was emerging, there were a few hopes about BRICS becoming not necessarily an alternative, but a factor of change or maybe shift towards a more balanced, I shouldn't say just, but a little bit more balanced world, a little bit less dominated by Western imperialism and so on and so on. Since then, however, things unfolded not the way we would like them to develop. And definitely, by the way, when BRICS was emerging, Brazil had a progressive government, and India didn't yet have the current government of Narendra Modi, which is very right-wing and which is a very typical combination, a very typical and unpleasant combination of right-wing populism and neoliberalism and so on. Also, the developments in China were not very encouraging. I cannot say much about South Africa, but let me speak about Russia now, because again, if we discuss what was Russian political and economic system, say 10 years ago or something, it was never democratic. It was never any kind of progressive. But however, we witnessed within the last 10 years, especially within the last 5 years, constant deterioration of the quality of administration and the quality of politics in Russia, which also itself reflected the decline and crisis of Russian capitalism, which is a very typical example of peripheral capitalism, using Wallersteinian terms, capitalism which forms the kind of oligarchy based on extractionism, on the exports of raw materials, at the same time accumulating massive resources which are used for local regional expansionism. So in that sense, the term of sub-imperialism is very adequate. And one can say that, yes, in a certain sense, Russia as a country which is exporting raw materials to the world market is very dependent on the world market, on the centers of global capitalism. At the same time, Russian elites themselves try to play the role of some kind of dominant imperialist force within the traditional region of the former Soviet Union and around it. And also, in many ways, we can see that if we are looking now at the events in Ukraine, we can see that Russian elite treats Ukraine as a kind of former colony, which had their strange, which acquired a strange idea of becoming an independent country, which they considered to be something unnatural. If you read official texts from Russian politicians, or you watch Russian official television, though now there is no television except the government television, actually. So you just watch television, and you get this idea daily that the very idea of an independent Ukraine is absurd. It cannot and shouldn't exist. The very idea that somebody exists as an independent country outside of the former Russian Empire, anybody who used to be part of the empire, this is kind of unnatural. This is something unnatural, shouldn't be there. However, there is one very important point we have to make. That yes, the Russian state is extremely authoritarian, and as I told you, it's very much the capitalist extractionist regime in decline because of the development of global trends, which do not kind of do not benefit this kind of structures, these kind of states, and these kind of oligarchies which are dependent on the global economy, which itself is in crisis. But at the same time, we should not forget that Ukraine is not a very nice place for workers and ordinary people either. Ukrainian state also is a very reactionary state. It is systematically discriminating Russian speakers, which form about half of the population of the Ukrainian Republic. In terms of labor rules and in terms of exploitation of workers, in many ways, Ukraine is even worse than Russia. Also, very high levels of unemployment and impoverishment, destruction of what remains of the Soviet welfare state goes on both in Ukraine and in Russia. In Ukraine, to some extent, it even goes faster. So, in that sense, when we're looking at these two countries, it's difficult to say that there is anybody who can be, for us, presented just as a good guy. However, having said all this, I still have to insist that the aggressive side in this conflict is Russia. It's Russian government, not Russian people, of course, Russian government. These are not Ukrainian troops attacking Russian and bombing Russian cities, shelling Russian cities. No. It's Russian troops shelling Ukrainian cities and Russian aircrafts bombing Ukrainian cities and so on. So in that sense, we have to be, on the one hand, we have to be very balanced in understanding this conflict, in understanding the class nature of both sides, and not having any illusions about any good guys being involved in this conflict. However, especially as a Russian socialist, I have to insist that the major responsibility for the conflict at this stage of the conflict, I stress, at this stage of the conflict, is on Russian elites, on the Russian government. Again, we don't have time to go deeper into the story of the conflict because during these years, the situation changed, and there were also problems on the Ukrainian side. I have to stress we cannot say that it was always Russia which was the side which was kind of more expansionist. I mean, sometimes Ukrainian elites also, well, they organized the coup d'etat in 2014 and so on. So there are also reasons to blame Ukrainian elites, but again, I stress that in this current stage of the events, it's the main blame is on the Russian elites, on the Russian government. And finally, speaking about what's happening inside the country, there is an ongoing attack on civil rights and what remains of democratic rights and freedoms is completely abolished. However, there is a very strong and very effective resistance. People almost daily, somebody goes to jail. I spent 10 days in jail also recently, and that's okay. I mean, this in Russia it's considered to be a normal thing, and unless you're kind of a suspicious guy unless you spent a few time in jail in this country. But anyhow, we get people jailed, arrested almost every day, and still the resistance goes on. And I think it's very interesting that the left is very much kind of on the first line, so to speak, of the resistance. It is very visible. Although official parties, including the parties which pretend to be on the left, like the Communist Party or the Social Democrats of Just Russia Party, they back the government. They back the government totally on almost everything. But these are official parties in the Duma which do not represent anybody anymore. But if you're looking even at the members of the Communist Party, there is a very strong resistance to militarism, to this kind of policies. And I think that we have reasons to be optimistic because we are we are not depressed, we are not demoralized. On the contrary, the elites are getting increasingly depressed and demoralized for one simple reason: they're not winning the war, they're losing the war. The war is not going to be won by the Russian army. And then, we have, there is a joke here in our country. There is a joke, which is a very specific Russian joke, that we have a good tradition. Every time we lose a war, we organize a revolution. This actually did happen this way. Russia lost Crimean War that ended up in big, serious reforms, progressive reforms. Then Russian-Japanese War, it was the first revolution. First World War was lost also for Russia. It was the second revolution. Well, Afghanistan led to the, which is not necessarily very good news, but which led to the collapse of the Soviet Union, but also led to some democratization in the former Soviet republics, in the former Soviet Union. So every time there is a war lost in Russia, there is some social and political change, and I think it's going to happen soon in this country as well. So there are some reasons for optimism. And finally, when I'm speaking about BRICS, the official BRICS, the BRICS of elites, the BRICS of oligarchs, yes, there is not much to expect from it. But I think the reason for us to continue working on people's BRICS, building up people's BRICS, building up people's solidarities in these countries, I think it's more necessary than ever. And I think it's exactly what we have to continue doing.